Hey everybody, it's Meredith Miller with Inner Integration, helping you to self-heal after narcissistic abuse. Today, the topic I have for you is the narcissistic family is like a cult. I'm going to describe the characteristics of cults, and I'm going to describe the characteristics of narcissistic families. In other words, where a narcissist or other personality disordered individual is the matriarch or patriarch of that family. And then I'm going to give you kind of some ideas of what to expect if you do decide to defect from that cult or family, and what I recommend that you do in order to move forward and heal yourself. So if you watch any, documentaries, any studies that they've done on cults, what they've found is that the majority of cult leaders are either narcissists or psychopaths. You will see those same exact dynamics in the family where the narcissist or psychopath positions him or herself as the matriarch or patriarch. There is a Netflix series called Inside the Criminal Mind. I think it's the third episode is on cult leaders, and they identified the characteristics of cults, which I want to share with you so you can see just how similar these are to the family involving a narcissist. So the first one is that it involves an authoritarian leader, and that person has absolute power over the other members, over their reality, over their perceptions, over their behaviors. And what that leader says is right. And that leader is generally worshipped by the rest of that cult. The second one is indoctrination. So how does that work inside of a cult is they break you down at first, and then they change you, and then they reset you so that you're now living in the reality and the mindset of the leader of that cult. The third characteristic is that the cult does harm to its members. So typically what happens is at first, they pretend to be fulfilling a need that the members have. They might even manufacture that need, but generally it's pretty easy because when these are spiritual cults especially, and I even saw this kind of thing happening in the spiritual communities in Peru. I've heard of this happening in Colorado, in Bali, in Hawaii, and basically all of those hubs, like the spiritual hubs in the planet, you'll also find these spiritual psychopaths and narcissists leading groups. I've worked with several people who have escaped those groups. They told me very similar stories. So you'll come in with some kind of need, and usually that person is seeking something. They're lost, they're seeking something. That's a deep vulnerability that the cult then preys upon. So the cult will encourage you to be vulnerable, and then they will prey upon the information that you share. They will encourage you to be open and to share everything with everyone, and then they will use that information against you. They will encourage you to create a dependency and like an enmeshment among the other group, the other members of the group, and also among the group as a whole. They will discourage individuation and boundaries. So that's pretty much a summary of cults and how they function. Now, I want to talk about the characteristics of a narcissistic family. So the very first one is that that family will protect the image of the family over the well-being of any of its members. So that includes they don't care about your pain, they don't care about your suffering, they don't care about the abuse that you endured by members of that family. They would rather protect the image of the group. If you speak up and you speak your truth about someone in that family having abused you, you will be scapegoated immediately. Even if you were before then the golden child in that family dynamic, you will forever be the scapegoat. They will start talking behind your back. They will tell you straight to your face that it didn't happen. They will eulogize and praise the abusers that they know abused you, that you had revealed to them that this person or multiple people had abused you, whether sexually, physically, mentally, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. They don't care. They will protect the image first and foremost. You will notice that the moment you start to speak up about the abuse in your family. The other one, the most common characteristic of the narcissistic family is that they're all subscribed to a very distorted reality, and conformity is expected. You're not allowed to challenge that reality, have a different reality, say that any of that isn't true at all. Individuation is punished. Boundaries are not accepted. So individuation is where you have an identity of your own. You are an independent being, a human being, especially as an adult. But even as a child, that individuation is not tolerated in terms of your likes, your dislikes, what you want to do, what you don't want to do, anything like that. And you're not allowed to have any boundaries. There is no privacy in a narcissistic family. You know, you go to school when you're a kid and your narcissistic mother or father is going through all your stuff. You come home and it's like you're being interrogated by the Nazi SS because they're running through everything that they found or everything that they suspect they found, or even they didn't find anything and they're trying to make up something that they found that they didn't find just to make you feel guilty and confess to something that you didn't even do. So you're always going to see the golden child and scapegoat dynamic in the narcissistic family. The purpose of that is to divide and conquer. They have to have the siblings warring against each other, the cousins warring against each other, always pitting people against each other, always making the matriarch or the patriarch or whomever the narcissist is in that family is going to make themselves be, the only right one, the one who everyone defers to for their sense of reality, the one who everyone defers to for their authority, for their perception. And they're always going to be trying to pit the other members against each other. They're going to tell you false things about each other. They're going to share very personal, intimate things about your life with other people that other people should not know and that you didn't want people to know. There is a tremendous amount of gossiping. I did a video on that. Some people were a bit offended by that. If you're offended easily, then probably you don't want to listen to this next part. So that gossip circle, it's often on the phone or it's on the family gatherings, and it's like, oh yeah, did you hear about so-and-so's health problems? Oh, it's just so terrible. Oh, and so-and-so and their marriage problems, and oh, poor them, they just can't have, a healthy relationship. Gee, oh, and their mental problems. Oh, and it's just gossip about the members of the family. And, the same people that they're gossiping about are the same people they're going to see at a family gathering, and to their face, they're going to be all sucking up and super helpful and kind and sweet if they're the covert type. If they're the overt type, they're pretty much just going to be a loud asshole most of the time. They're going to be that person in the family that is just always saying those ridiculous things, offensive things, racist things, loud things, and everybody else just goes, oh, that's just dad, or oh, that's just mom. So there are both covert and overt versions of what I'm describing here, depending on how that plays out in your family, whether or not the matriarch or patriarch is more overt or more covert. You're also going to notice how there are abusers and enablers in that family. There may be more than one abuser. There might be one who's like the leader, the matriarch, or the patriarch, but typically they're surrounded by similar characters, usually of the lesser order. They're not quite as smart, they're not quite as cunning, they're not quite as able to manage the whole family's authority as the matriarch or patriarch does. They're like flying monkeys, but they're also disordered. Then you get flying monkeys who are enablers, who are either clueless or naive or severely codependent and rug sweeping everything and pretending like everything's okay when it's not. This you'll see very clearly in the Pennsylvania grand jury report on the Catholic Church. You can see how there are abusers, and then there are the enablers, meaning the bishops, the higher ups, who the abuse cases were reported to. And these cover-uppers, these enablers, aggressively covered up the abuse. That's the exact same thing that's going to happen in the family. Those people may or may not be disordered, but they're definitely toxic if they're covering up that abuse and they're shutting down your truth because they would rather protect the image of the family. You're going to notice the very typical love bombing, devaluation, abuse cycle. That leads to the trauma bond. That leads to the Stockholm syndrome. That leads to cognitive dissonance. The narcissistic members of that family are always either going to be love bombing you or devaluing you. In the moments when you think they're just being nice and pleasant, they're not. That's part of the love bombing. Love bombing doesn't always look like over the top gushing, over the top attention and whatnot. It could just be that things are pleasant for right now. And be very careful, because if you settle into that pleasantness and you drop your guard, that is exactly the moment they're going to come around with some kind of thing that's going to hurt you. Another thing is any disagreement from, let's say, the distorted reality perception or what the narcissist says is right and true. Any sort of disagreement is taken as an attack. Then they will attack you and say that you're the one who has attacked them. You'll be punished for that. That can, again, come in more covert or overt versions. There's going to be mantras in the narcissistic family. They're going to say things like, all families are dysfunctional. Or they're going to say, family is the most important thing. Or they're going to talk about your dead elder, grandma, grandpa, great aunt, great uncle, so-and-so, just, the most important thing to them is that we stay close. Or the typical, that's just mom, that's just dad, that's just uncle so-and-so, that's just aunt so-and-so. These are mantras that are used to excuse, to rug sweep, to create sort of euphemisms to get around the abuse so that we don't actually call it abuse and we can minimize and rationalize it instead. You're often also going to find spiritual and religious abuse in the family. So if the narcissist, psychopath, etc. is religious or spiritual, they're going to use the dogma or the tenets or the beliefs of that religion or that particular spiritual school of thought to abuse people in the family. God doesn't want you to do that. You are a sinner. Those kinds of things will come from the religious families. The spiritual families will use things like, just be positive. You're so negative, when you bring up things that aren't okay for you. So it's like on top of the other kinds of forms of abuse, you're going to get the spiritual and religious abuse as well. And just like a cult, these people will infiltrate everyone in your life. So if the narcissist or psychopath is one of your parents, they will be sure to infiltrate all of your cousins, all of your friends. They're going to make, your friends their friends and try to be cool in front of your friends. And essentially what they're going to try to do is extract information and disseminate propaganda. That is exactly why they will infiltrate all those people in your life. Maybe even your parents come to visit you and your narc parent is like talking to the neighbors and stuff. Like they are infiltrating everyone in your life to make sure that everyone is under that trance and you're the only one who's going to challenge that. Another thing they often do in narcissistic families is hold the will over your head. They're always talking about how much money you're going to get or how the money is going to be divided, or they're going to tell you, if you do such and such, you're going to get so much money in the will. Usually what happens in narcissistic families is that money disappears somehow. Like it's not left to you. It's either not there. Either they talk about, oh, grandpa was a millionaire and blah, 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 but then where was the money? And grandpa left nothing to you and your siblings. Or they're going to talk about all the money that's waiting for you, and they're going to keep dangling that on the stick so that you keep submitting to the abuse and you keep hanging around and taking care of them, and then they die. Maybe this is one of your parents or your aunt or your uncle or something, and they die and they left nothing to you. It was all just a carrot on a stick, the future faking. The same thing that's done in intimate relationships, only in this case in the family, they're using the will to hold that over your head. And finally, what you'll notice is a similar worshiping of the matriarch or the patriarch in your family, just as it's done as in cults. So, especially if this person is a covert type, that's going to be the hardest one because no one in your family is going to want to see that. Most people are going to be clueless. They're going to be like, oh, your mother's just so wonderful, or your father's just a pillar of the community and family. They're going to have no idea. They're even going to snow over the people who marry into your family. They're going to create surrogate daughters and sons out of people like that. And usually those same people had a narcissistic parent. And it's like maybe they can even see that their parent was disordered, but they totally can't see how your parent is disordered because your parent is extremely covert and they're love bombing them. They're like, this is the love that I never got from my parent. So expect those things to happen. It could be very difficult to find allies in the family when you wake up. One, because you could be surrounded by mostly personality disordered individuals. Or two, there could be a lot of codependence in the mix. They just could be clueless, naive, not able to see, or totally dependent on the abusers in that family, and therefore they will defend them, they will stand by them, they will take a stance against you. It could be very hard to find allies. So when it comes to your escape from the narcissistic family, what you'll find is this is the fight for your life. It is the fight of your life, and it is the fight to reclaim your life, the life that you never had because you were subscribed to that reality, an extension of the narcissist, stuck in that whole group dynamic, subscribed to that very distorted reality perception. It is going to be the most difficult decision of your life to start putting boundaries with the family, to start distancing yourself from the family, to move away from the family, and eventually and hopefully to go no contact with the narcissistic members of that family and their flying monkey enablers. So what you'll find is this is the most difficult decision you'll ever have to make. When you do make the decision, you will likely find that it was the best decision that you ever had to make. Both I and all of the clients that I've talked to who have been able to escape their narcissistic families, we've all said it was not only the most difficult decision of our lives, the best decision of our lives, and the only regret that we had is not doing it sooner. You know, how much of your life have you already given up for that? What you could find as well is that even opting out of family gatherings for holidays creates a similar backlash. You'll get a taste of what you're going to experience when you go no contact with the family, when you say for the first time you're not going to Thanksgiving, or you're not going to Christmas or a birthday or a christening or a baptism or whatever comes up in the family. You've probably heard the metaphor of the crabs, where there's a pot, they're about to cook the crabs, and they're alive, of course, and so the crabs are all scrambling around in there. Maybe one crab starts to climb out, the rest of the crabs will pull that crab back down into the pot. That is the kind of dynamic that you're going to see in the family. You could even see that from people who are not disordered, from the codependents who are just so scared that you're going to disrupt the whole dynamic, and you will, because when one person taps out of that family dynamic, it creates a tsunami throughout that whole family, and everything has to shift around. So that person becomes the scapegoat, and then maybe the person who was the scapegoat before then becomes more the golden child and becomes love bombed. And now they need to find like another person within the immediate family to scapegoat. They're always going to shit talk you and scapegoat you, but you're not there, so that's not nearly as fun and sadistic for them. So they're going to have to find someone who's still connected in there to create that dynamic. So everything is going to kind of get wonky at first, and then eventually it's going to settle down, but there's probably going to be people who are just so scared of the changes that are going to come. They don't mean anything, bad or negative against you. They're just too scared to make those changes in their own life, and they're scared of the repercussions that's going to happen to them. Like if you have a few siblings, when you leave, now that abuse is gone. Like the parent can't abuse you anymore. So now your percentage of the abuse that you received is now going to be distributed among the siblings who are left. So if you had only one other sibling, that sibling now, instead of receiving 50% of the abuse, is going to be receiving 100% of the abuse. So they definitely have a vested interest in you not leaving that family dynamic. Here's what I recommend when you're thinking about leaving the family dynamic, when you're ready to defect from that narcissistic family cult. The very first thing you need to do is start unsubscribing from their reality. So check out the podcast episode I did on that. That's the Inner Integration podcast. There's an episode on unsubscribing from the narcissist reality that is extremely important in order to set yourself up for success, in order to get out, and in order to completely divorce that reality long after you're out and all those thoughts and beliefs and everything are still running through your head. Another thing that you need to work on is building your self-trust. You have to rebuild that sense of self-trust that's been killed. if you have grown up in a family like that, they did not want you to trust yourself. You were only supposed to trust the family dynamic, the family reality system. So that could be maybe for the first time in your life, you're just starting to build self-trust. That is a work in progress. I've done some videos on that. I also have a podcast episode on the 4 pillars of recovery. Self-trust is one of those. Be willing to be alone at first, because maybe you're the first person to wake up in that family. Maybe you're the only person ever to wake up in that family to end the legacy of abuse. Maybe. But at the very beginning, at the very least, you're likely to be the only one to wake up, and it's going to be very lonely. So you're going to have to be willing to do that. Hopefully you'll be able to find allies. That's the next thing I encourage you to do. It's possible that you could find 1 or 2 or even a few allies in that family. They might not be in your immediate family, but more the extended family. Maybe you have a large family, and so they're cousins and whatnot who grew up in, similar kinds of homes. Maybe it was one of their parents was also a narcissist or psychopath. Maybe they also grew up watching your parents and recognized which one of them was disordered as well. So having that ally is so important if that's possible for you and your family, because that person will help keep you sane. That person will validate you. And I really don't know what I would have done without my cousin. She is like the one person who was really able to maintain her reality and get out and save her children from being exposed to that same legacy of abuse. And she was able to see my mother. I'm able to see her mother. We're able to see other family members and the things that have gone on. And it's like, I can't even tell you how life-saving that is to have an ally. If you don't have an ally in your family and you are truly alone and the only one who's going to escape from your family, you still have to find some kind of allies in your life. That doesn't always happen in stage 1. Sometimes in stage 1 of the recovery, you're totally alone. But by the time you get into stage 2, that's when you usually can start to find some allies, some people who will validate your story. Maybe they had a similar family. They can totally get what you're talking about. They're not going to invalidate you or tell you that didn't happen, or, maybe they really didn't mean it. Like, they totally get it. You can tell them stories and they validate you. And also, build a new family. Once you escape out of that, you want to build a new family. You want to find people, maybe an adopted mother, an adopted father, adopted siblings, whatever. But these are close friends, soul sisters, soul brothers that become your new family. Beware, at first, you might attract some people who are similar to, your disordered parent or other family members. They might look different at first, but then as you get to know them, they reveal more of themselves, and you're like, wow, that sounds a lot like mom, or that sounds a lot like dad, and you end up needing to get those people out of your life as well, because maybe you met them in the earlier stages. But as you go along in that recovery process, you will meet better quality people, loving people. The more that you work on healing yourself, you'll be able to recognize that a lot quicker in other people. Even the more covert types, they will reveal themselves a lot faster. It is extremely important to go no contact when you are ready, because that will keep you sane. Like, at first, maybe you start setting boundaries and you do more minimum contact and you do the gray rock. But what you're going to find is that your nervous system keeps betraying you when you meet people like those disordered people in your family, because you're still tolerating a little bit of contact from them, maybe even a few times a year. But your nervous system will betray you when you're face to face with another abusive person. In terms of the enablers, the severe codependence in your family, that's going to be a case-by-case basis. It's going to be a moment-by-moment basis. So maybe minimal contact works right now. Not having any boundaries with that person is not going to be okay, because that person is probably in the trauma bond with the abuser, especially if they're married and they're a couple. It's like your other parent or something like that. So be careful. Definitely set boundaries. Don't share anything with that parent that you don't want getting back to the other parent. And it just might get to the point where you're realizing that person is just doing their bidding. Like, they're asking for things, or even the way they word questions, that wasn't your dad that asked the question. It was your mom telling your dad to ask you that question. So when it gets to the point where you're realizing that person has no boundaries, with the abuser, they're essentially doing abuse by proxy to you. You might need to step up those boundaries. You might need to minimize the contact more. You might eventually need to get to the point where you go no contact with that person as well, which can be really sad and devastating, but maybe necessary for your health, for your sanity, for your well-being, for your peace, for your success, for your everything. And finally, be prepared to be scapegoated. Be prepared to be shit-talked by the whole family, because that is just inevitably what's going to happen. They have to do that in order to protect the image of the family. And that's okay. That's a small price to pay for your freedom, for your life, for your whole different sense of self and reality that you're going to be living in after you escape from that cult. So I want to recommend a couple things. One is one of my clients' blog. It's called narcsucks.blogspot.com. I'm going to put the link below in the video description. She has an article over there on the side. You'll see it's called The Narcissist's Cult. And she compares it to the movie The Truman Show, which is really fascinating. I also want to encourage you to look at the FBI analysis of the Catholic Church and how they covered up the abuse. They create a 7-point system, which they call the playbook for concealing the truth. It is really fascinating. And also check out that Netflix episode on Inside the Criminal Minds on cult leaders. You might get a lot of insight from that. Also, I just want to make a couple quick announcements. I have only a few more openings for 30-minute sessions the first and second week of December. My schedule is totally booked into then. After the second week of December, I'm no longer going to be doing one-on-one sessions. I'm transitioning into a one-to-many model. So after the beginning of 2019, I'm moving into a group monthly coaching subscription program. It's going to be called the Mental Ninja Mastery, and it's going to help you to maintain and create the mindsets that are going to help you have success in life, to unsubscribe from all of those belief systems that you were inculcated into, whether it was a relationship you had in adulthood or multiple relationships in adulthood, or someone that you worked for, friendships, or whether you grew up in this. So I am going to be phasing out the one-on-one sessions by the end of this year. And I decided to do this because my schedule has been filling like several weeks in advance. It's been hard to manage that. You know, I can never get sick. I can never have an internet problem, because then everything gets all messed up. And also because I want to be able to help more people. And I think that the group setting will be really helpful for people as well, because I'm going to create also a separate private Facebook group for those people where they can contribute to each other, talk to each other, get validation from each other. Something amazing happens in your healing journey when you can help someone else. It's like somehow that ends up being helpful for you. Somehow that ends up being healing for you when you have something you say that matters to someone else, and you can see that relief or that change in that person, and you feel like you've done something to contribute to someone's life for the better. So stay tuned for more information on that. I will be announcing that later in December. And I also want to remind you, check out the Inner Integration podcast. You can find us on YouTube, on iTunes. All the links are below in the video description. So every other week we have a new video on YouTube, and then on the other weeks we have a new podcast episode. Check those out. Also join us on Instagram. You're going to get daily content there on the weekly videos and on the throwback videos, the weeks that we don't have a new video. Every Wednesday, I put out a short 1-minute Instagram special video on just something that occurs to me. Maybe it has to do with the video that week, or maybe it's unrelated. Also, check out the Facebook page for Inner Integration. You're going to find daily content on there as well that's easily shareable. I hope that you share this with someone that needs to hear this message, someone who's suffering through a narcissistic family situation. And if you're in that, I totally feel for you. I know how difficult that is. I know how difficult the holidays are when you're in a narcissistic family, and even after you've gotten out, because all the memories, all the hoovering, all the contact attempts, and everything else. So stay strong. I know this is a hard time of the year. You're going to get through this. Everything is going to be okay. Please do leave a comment below if you got out of your narcissistic family. Leave some kind of hope, some breadcrumb trail of hope for the people who want to do it, who know they need to do it, but just don't have the courage yet, or just aren't in the place of independence, maybe financial independence yet, where they can do it. Give them that glimmer of hope, please, by sharing something from your journey in the comments below. I'm sending you all a big hug.